In the previous video, we explained that this version here is very, very bad because it contains lots of duplicates of code checking the destination and also departure cities explicitly using the if statements. So whenever you got duplicates in your code, we say that your code smells. It's definitely not a good thing, especially the structural design for your code. So we would like to improve it without actually having so many duplicates. We're still going to use the one-dimensional arrays, but we can greatly improve by eliminating the code smell or duplicates in your code. Let's now set it up. So let me just go back to the package explorer, and then let me rename the current the version from just rename the class over here. Okay, let me also clear the console just to avoid confusion. Okay, let me right-click on mileage app. And then refactor rename mileage app, let's say 1A. Okay, so that'll be version A. And finish. And what we want to do now is to copy that and also paste it in the same console apps package. And paste it. We want to call that 1B. Okay, so 1A and 1B. So version 1, actually our version 1 is really using one-dimensional arrays as separate variables, which is pretty bad, as we'll remark at the end of the current video. However, between version A and version B, we are really trying to improve, not really by removing all the one-dimensional variables, but we just want to improve by removing all the duplicates. So one improvement at a time. Let's say OK over here. So we got 1B. Okay, let me close 1A. Let me click on 1B over here. Okay, so now the idea will be as we explained in the previous video, there are two levels of the duplicates about checking all the 7 possible cities, either for destination or for the departure. So what we like to do is to refactor to factor out that particular check into maybe a helper method, and the helper method should really tell us about whether the city, if that's Chicago, it should really tell us it should be returning 0. If that's New York, they should really tell us it's actually 2. That's something we'd like to do. Okay. What I could have done is simply just create a utilities class in the model package, but let's not bother with creating a new package for this week. So what I can do instead, which we didn't do before, is definitely allowed. So you can think about mileage app 1B. It's like the utilities class, right? It's just that itself also contains the main method for console application purpose. But we can definitely declare like a public static methods over here, like what we did in the utility class before. Okay, why don't we do that? Have a helper method. So let me just document it. You can say helper method for returning the corresponding index of a city in the array, right? Oh, notice one thing. For all the 7 arrays over here, when we say index 0, for example, index 0 is about this particular number, right? Index 0 is always from a particular city to Chicago, the destination. For example, index 0, 1, 2, 3. For index 3, which will be this particular column, so the index 3 for all the 7 arrays talk about from a particular city to Atlanta, right? So that's something you should also know from before. I just want to remind you. Okay, so now how do we define this helper method? So public static. So we don't need to create a context object to call this method. We can just use mileage app 1B, the class name dot the method name. Okay, so I can say maybe index of. I can say that, right? Index of, and then it's going to be some city name. I can say city. And then, depending on what the city is, I'm going to return the corresponding value, right? Let me show to you the pattern. I can simply copy, and then I will change it accordingly. So, for example, I can simply use this, for example, right? So I know these are all the 7 possible cities I should check. So let me copy this fragment of code over here. So Chicago, Boston, New York, Atlanta, Miami, Dallas, and Houston, right? Let me go back here, and then I would say, let me declare integer index over here. Let's say -1 as the default value, and then return the index eventually. So I would expect to reassign the value for, I forgot to declare the return type, of course. That should be int. I expect to return the last reassigned value for index So if the city is actually invalid, in that case, I will never get a chance to reassign index to be something other than -1. In that case, it was simply just return the invalid index. But for this version here, for version 1, we assume there's no error checking needed. We assume the city is going to be valid. Paste. Okay. So now, rather than destination, I can say city. Let me do that first. So city, 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 paste, paste, and paste. If the city, if the city that's being passed as input, and now when we use it, we can either pass the destination city here, or we can pass the departure city, either way. So we can really reuse this helper method for as many times as we need. So it's a much improved version from version 1A, right? So now if that's Chicago, so that means the index we should really use should be Chicago. So that means index should be assigned to Chicago, right? Sorry, just somehow went to the end. So here, so that should be Chicago over here. And then let me just copy this part here. That's what I would need. So that will be Boston, right? And then I see. I don't seem to have those variables over here, right? You know what? Let's not complicate the matter. So I will keep these name constant over here. The reason is these are constant are only within the scope of the main method unless I declare some static variables over here, which I can do actually. I think we in the lecture we already spoke about static variables which can be used, which will be global, right? To be shared by you can just invoke them by using the class. Why don't we do that? Okay, let's do that. Okay, so why don't we say public static, okay, and then I'll do the same here. Okay, they are simply just static over here, right? And one thing to say, okay, over here, in principle, when you actually refer to the static variables, you should really say the class name. You should really say mileage app1b. You should really say mileage app1b dot Chicago. That's what you should really say. However, since we are defining this index of method inside this particular class, so the Java allows you to not really refer to the class name. However, if you're trying to use this particular static variable from another external class, another class other than mileage app1b, you definitely have to use a mileage app1b.chicago. That's what you have to do, right? Just to remind you. But to really be consistent with what we did before, let me always put the class name and then dot static variables, right? Even though it may not be necessary, but let me just put it. All right, so now what I will do is I'm going to copy this part over here, and then in that case I'm going to say New York. Oh, actually I copied it wrong. Like that. Okay, so that'll be New York, and then another one will be Atlanta. Paste it, and also we got Miami. Right, you can see so far I'm just defining the helper method, and then I can replace every occurrence of the repetition by using the helper method. That's what I can do, right? And then Houston. So that'll be the last one. All right. Hopefully you have no question about this particular helper method, right? You just have to make sure you recall to really call the static variables. In principle, you should really put the class name. But if that's inside this particular class that you declare those static variables, it would not be necessary to put a class name. However, I would say to avoid confusion, why don't we just put it, right? It's easier to be consistent with our notation from before. All right, let's see how we can improve the code from version 1A, right? I would say this. Okay, let me just put things over here. Now that we know about the departure and destination, so now we can find out the index, right? We can say integer index, let's say departure index over here should be index of, should be mileage 1b, right? The current version dot index of departure city. So using the departure as the arguments, I want to work out exactly what I want to work out what's the index for that, right? However, to really once we figure out departure index, it may not be so useful because we still have to see what the index value is and then determine accordingly what the array we should really look up over here. However, this will be useful when we get to the ultimate version. So let me just get prepared as well. Okay, you'll see what I mean in just a moment. And we'll do something similar. So especially this is really the key why we're doing this. The main benefits for us to really do this helper method. Let's say destination index will be mileage app1b.index of, and then the destination, right? So we now got the two indices. Okay, and now what we can do is we still need the destination. The departure city. So we can say if the departure city index is equal to, for example, mileage app1b dot, the first one should be Chicago, right? If that's the case, in that case, we don't need this anymore, I can tell you. Why don't you pause the video and tell me what can we replace this fragment of code by, now that we know about the destination index already over here? Think about it. All right, assuming that you thought about it, we know that we must index from Chicago array over here. And now the index over here, we don't have to check to see what the destination is anymore like before, because we already know what its index is, which is destination index, right? So what I will do is I'm going to say current distance is simply assigned to from Chicago and index what? Well, destination index. That's basically what I should do. All right, hopefully you see that. All right, you can see we still have to check what the departure index is, but alternatively, you can still use the departure dot equals Chicago. You can use that one, doesn't really matter. So the point, let me make that remark maybe when I'm done. Okay. What about for Boston, right? I can say here departure index is equal to mileage app1b dot Boston, and then I can do something very similar to this, except that the array I need to index into will be from Boston, right? From Boston over here, right? And then I'll do something similar over here. Let me show you both versions. I can still keep this. It will be okay. You can either use the city name, or you can use the index. Either way, right? They will both work. So let me keep them over here. Okay. So now I'm gonna need. Let me copy this line. So now, which array should I get access from? It should be New York, right? That'll be the departure. So that should be the one to index from. So from New York, okay, and then replace this by from Atlanta. Atlanta over here, and also from Miami. You can see now we have greatly simplified the structure for the code. The amount of computation will still be done. However, it's just that we're calling the helper method to figure out the index first. So that's why it's greatly simplified for our code, right? That's really refactoring is about. Current index, so that from Atlanta, so from Miami over here, and two more. And this one should be from dollars, and also from Houston. And so from Houston. All right. You can one more time. So you can see here we can either use the index for the departure city, which we figure out from over here, right? Either you can use it, or you can still keep departure dot equals departure city dot equals New York, something like that, right? You can use either one. You can see from version 1a to 1b. I can run the console apps in just a moment. I'll do that, and also use debugger. Basically, this version also works, and it's a great improvement by removing lots of duplicates. However, there is still one very great disadvantage. Okay, you can see even though we can calculate even though we can calculate the index of the departure city, right? However, we still have to, since we got separate variables for separate rows over here, so we still have to use this particular if then else structure to say, if it's about Chicago, we should really get access to this particular array. If it's actually Boston, we should really get access to this particular array. Wouldn't it be nice if we can somehow combine all these 7 variables into a single variable, so that for that particular single variable, we can use departure index and destination index directly without any conditionals to check which separate array to really index into. So that's two-dimensional array is really about. Okay, just keep that inside, please. And it may not make much sense to you, but write it down if you want. And then there's something you want to really appreciate once we introduce two-dimensional array. Okay. Let me now try to let me just write something over here. In this improved version, we still have to. Okay, let me just briefly summarize what I just said. We still have to use a conditional on departure index to figure out which separate array variable to index into. It would be very nice. It would be very effective. Okay, let me fix the typo here. It should be variable. It would be very effective if all 7 array variables can be combined into one, so that we can actually use departure and we can use these 2 indices, departure index, destination index, at one go. We'll see that without a conditional. All right, that's about the insight I'd like to say. Let me run it and then use debugger, and then we are done. Okay, so that's you can really compare 1A to 1B. Before we move on to introduce two-dimensional arrays, we'll do that. Let me run it over here to make sure every time you do any refactoring, for example, you define a helper method and replace all the duplicates by the helper method call, you want to make sure it's still working. If you kind of remove the duplicates by compromising the correctness, you're doing something totally useless. You want to make sure correctness is always the key. How many cities? Let's say 4, and then Boston, Chicago, Miami, and Houston. All right, it's still working. Very good. Okay, let me show you debugger very quickly if you don't mind. Okay, let's do that quickly. So what I would do is I'm still going, let me just put the breakpoint over here. So we're going to pause it over here for the very first iteration for the loop, right? Let's now use debugger, run it. Okay. And then let me just make sure we are, let me stop this, right? Let me make sure I'm really running that particular version. If I move my cursor over the block, it's really, okay, it's really debugging mileage app 1B, right? Click on that. Okay, so now let's do it again. Boston. And then, oh, actually, you know what? It should be 4. Sorry, not Boston. Beg your pardon. Let's say no. My bad. Let me stop this. Close this. Do it again. Click on the debug. And then, how many cities? 4. And then, there we go, Boston. And then, Chicago. And then, Miami. And also, Houston. All right, so now we switch to the debug perspective. So now you can see we got departure, destination, right? So this is something we have seen before. So departure, destination, you can see one is Boston and also Chicago, right? So the trip array is actually this particular array. We have seen that previously. So now the departure is Boston, and also Chicago is actually destination. And we actually want to figure out this index over here by calling index of 2 times. And if you like, you can also say just recall, you can say step into over here, and then this one here is going to tell you how you can calculate index of what's the city, Boston. So that's the departure, right? And then if I just go all the way to over here, so I can say step return all the way to here, the index is simply just 1, right? So that's 1. And however, the one here is still, you still got to use a condition to check that. One tells you you got to really index into the from Boston array. So that's something we'll see yet another improvement when we get to version number 2. Okay, let's say step over. All right, and then we're going to see here, basically, the destination index over here. So now we are back to the app itself. So what's the destination index over here? If I say step over, you will see destination index is actually 0. So that's for Chicago. So now we know that the departure index is 1. Index 1 tells you that you should really go to the from Boston array. So if I say step over, that departure index does not match Chicago, right? So we're going to say step over, right? So now else if. So you can see mileage app1b.boston, this one here, is simply just 1. You can check it out over here. So I can say mileage app1b. Okay, let me just type properly. Mileage app1b.boston is simply 1, right? So 1 is matching the departure index. And then, so that means we want to go to from Boston array and go to this particular destination index. So if you go to destination index, it will be 0. So we want to go to basically from Boston and go to index 0. So that's what we want, right? 983. If I say step over, it will be set to 983, right? You can just move on and see exactly how we calculate 1B. I hope that's enough for you. All right, so that's about the version number 1. I would like to speak about using solving this problem here. The reason I didn't really go directly to two-dimensional arrays to solve this problem is it's a very typical problem where you can definitely solve it simply by using like a separate variables for one-dimensional arrays if you didn't know how to program two-dimensional arrays. So that's why I would like to show to you. However, it really suffers from many drawbacks. For example, for version 1a, you actually suffer from duplicates, and for 1a and 1b, you suffer from separate variables corresponding to rows in the table. So those are the stuff we really want to get rid of by using two-dimensional arrays. However, if you see the final solution using two-dimensional arrays right away, in that case, you wouldn't really appreciate what kind of a convenience the two-dimensional arrays really give to you. So that's why I want to show you this like a more inferior solution using separate one-dimensional arrays variables first. Okay. All right, that's about version number 1 I would like to speak about. Review it. I think it's really nice review about loops and array and also console application. In the next video, before I move on to version 2 for the ultimate solution, I would like to speak about the syntax and semantics for two-dimensional arrays.